When my sister exposed my $12 million fortune at Thanksgiving, I thought my family would be proud, until greed turned love into betrayal overnight. I never imagined that one holiday dinner could rip apart everything I thought I knew about family. But that Thanksgiving, everything changed. The evening started beautifully. The smell of roasted turkey, laughter echoing through the house, glasses clinking, my mom humming along to an old song from the radio. It felt like one of those rare peaceful nights when everyone got along. I hadn't been home in months, so it felt good to see them smiling again, to feel like maybe things were finally simple. But looking back now, I can see it. That fragile piece was just waiting to crack. When it did, it shattered like glass. And it all started because of one secret I had kept, not out of shame, but out of self-preservation. My family had no idea that the company I started in my 20s had been sold. They didn't know I'd worked my way into a small fortune. I thought that telling them would only complicate things, make me feel like I had to justify every choice, every expense, every success. So, I kept quiet. I wanted to just be me around them, not Alex, the millionaire. But that night, fate had other plans. By the end of dinner, I wasn't their son or brother anymore. I was a symbol of everything they thought they'd been denied. Every smile, every warm word suddenly turned cold, sharp, and heavy. It's hard to describe what it feels like to see people you love look at you like you're not one of them anymore. Like you've somehow crossed a line you didn't even know existed. That was the night my family stopped seeing me as family. That was the night they started seeing me as a walking bank account. And that realization broke something deep inside me. Emily has always been the curious one, the kind of person who couldn't resist peeking behind a closed door or asking just one too many questions. Growing up, it was almost funny. She'd read my diary when we were kids, listen at my bedroom door when I was on the phone, and scroll through my texts if I left my phone unattended. I used to laugh it off back then. But that Thanksgiving, her curiosity cost me my peace. After dinner, everyone was lounging around the living room. My dad was half asleep on the recliner, Mom was clearing plates, and I was showing my niece a few photos from my recent trip on my iPad. I set it down on the counter for a minute to help Mom with something in the kitchen. That's when Emily picked it up. She said later she thought it was hers, but I know my sister. She knew exactly what she was doing. I heard her gasp before I even turned around. Then came her voice, loud and incredulous. "What the hell, Alex?" The room went quiet. My stomach dropped. I turned, and there she was, holding up my iPad with wide eyes. "You have $12 million sitting in your account," she practically shouted. The air changed instantly. My mom froze mid-step, her hand clutching a plate. My dad sat up straight, his face tight with confusion. My heart started pounding, every beat echoing in my ears. I tried to speak, but Emily said it again, louder this time, almost triumphant, as if she'd just exposed a crime. $12 million. I could feel every pair of eyes in that room land on me. In that split second, the warmth of the evening vanished. What replaced it was disbelief, envy, and something much darker brewing beneath. Everyone started talking at once. Voices overlapped, questions fired from every direction, and I just stood there, frozen. My mom's fork clattered onto her plate as she stared at me like I'd just confessed to something unforgivable. My dad leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Is this true, Alex? You really have that kind of money?" His tone wasn't shocked. It was suspicious, demanding. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Yeah, it's true. But it's not what you think. I built a company, remember? The one I started years ago? I sold it." I smiled weakly, waiting for some spark of pride. Maybe a "wow, we're proud of you." But instead, there was only silence, the kind that hums so loud it hurts your ears. Emily crossed her arms, scowling. "You sold it? For that much? You didn't even tell us." She said it like I'd betrayed her. My mom blinked a few times, then shook her head slowly. "Why would you keep that a secret from your family, Alex? Do you not trust us?" That word, family, hit me like a slap. I'd spent years working nonstop, burning through weekends, sleeping in my office. I missed birthdays, skipped vacations, lost friends. And all I wanted that night was to sit with my family, share a meal, and feel normal. But now, all they saw was the number in my bank account. My dad finally spoke, his voice sharp. "You've been sitting on millions while we've been scraping by? Unbelievable." I tried to explain. "It's not like that. I wasn't hiding it to hurt anyone. I just didn't want things to change." But it was too late. They were already changing before my eyes, their faces hardening, their love shrinking into resentment. The questions didn't stop. They only got louder, sharper, more personal. What started as disbelief quickly turned into accusation. My dad leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing in that way that always made me uneasy as a kid. "You know, your mother and I sacrificed plenty for you," he said. "Now it's time you give something back." My mom nodded beside him, tears brimming in her eyes, but they weren't tears of pride. They were guilt, the kind that manipulates. "You've done so well for yourself, Alex," she said softly. "But don't you think it's only fair to help your family now?" Then Emily jumped in, her voice cutting through the tension like glass. "I've been drowning in bills, Alex. The mortgage, the car, the kids' school fees. You could change all of that with a snap of your fingers. You wouldn't even feel it." She said it like it was my duty, not a request. I sat there in disbelief. "I've helped before," I said quietly. "Remember when I covered the house repairs? Emily, I helped with your medical bills. I even paid for Mom's vacation." Emily rolled her eyes. "That was ages ago. You've got millions now, Alex. You could easily make it right for everyone. Make it right." As if my success had somehow wronged them. My dad slammed his fist lightly against the table. "You're sitting on a fortune while we've been struggling. We're not asking for much, just our share." Their share. That word burned in my chest. They weren't asking for help. They were claiming ownership. Suddenly, the warmth of family turned to a negotiation table. I realized then, to them, I wasn't Alex anymore. I was opportunity. I was the solution to their problems. And it made me sick. That night spiraled faster than I could have ever prepared for. It was like the room had caught fire, and I was the only one trying not to get burned. Emily's voice rose first, sharp and full of bitterness. "You're sitting on millions while I can barely afford my kids' school supplies. How can you sleep at night knowing that?" My mom gasped, as if she'd just realized she'd raised some kind of monster. "You hid this from us, Alex. From your own family. How could you?" Then came my dad, always the loudest when he thought he was right. "You've become arrogant," he snapped. "You think a little money makes you better than us? You forgot who raised you." Every word hit harder than the last. I tried to explain that I wasn't hiding it to hurt anyone, that I just didn't want money to change how they saw me. But it already had. The second Emily said that number out loud, it was like a switch flipped in their heads. They weren't seeing me anymore, just what they could take. I kept trying to calm things down. "It's not about thinking I'm better," I said quietly. "It's about boundaries." But no one was listening. Emily's face twisted with anger. "You wouldn't even be this successful if it weren't for us," she spat. "All those lessons, all that support. You owe us, Alex." Oh, that word hung in the air like poison. I looked around the table, at my parents, my sister, the people who'd once cheered for me, and all I saw were strangers. Strangers who believed they were entitled to the life I built from the ground up. That was the moment something inside me broke. Family wasn't supposed to feel like this. I pushed my chair back, the sound of its legs scraping against the floor slicing through the chaos. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "I don't owe anyone for working my ass off," I said, my voice trembling but steady enough to be heard over their shouting. "I didn't build this to become your safety net." Emily scoffed, crossing her arms like she was the one being wronged. "Listen to you, Mr. Millionaire, talking down to us like we're beneath you." Her tone dripped with sarcasm, but underneath it, I could hear the resentment that had probably been brewing for years. My dad slammed his hand against the table, silverware clattering. "You're not leaving until we talk about what's fair." His voice was low, commanding, the same tone that used to freeze me as a kid. But this time, it didn't scare me, it disgusted me. Fair? What was fair about them treating me like a bank account with a pulse? I grabbed my coat from the back of my chair, trying to control my breathing. "What's fair," I said slowly, "is recognizing that I worked for this. I sacrificed for this. You weren't there at 3 a.m. when I was coding alone, or when I couldn't afford rent, or when I was living off ramen. You weren't there, but now you want the reward." My mom's voice cracked as she reached out. "Alex, please, don't walk away like this." I paused, looking at the faces that used to mean everything to me. Faces now twisted by greed and entitlement. "I'm not walking away," I said softly. "I'm just done being used." And with that, I turned and left. The silence that followed me out was louder than all their shouting combined. The following days felt like a storm that wouldn't end. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls, texts, voicemails. It was relentless. My mom's messages started out soft, pleading, "Alex, please, let's talk. You're tearing this family apart." Then they grew sharper. "You're breaking your mother's heart." My dad's tone was different, cold, calculated. "You owe us at least a conversation. Don't think you can ignore this." And Emily? Hers were the worst. Long, angry paragraphs filled with guilt and venom. "I can't believe you're abandoning your own family. You're so selfish. My kids shouldn't have to suffer just because you got lucky." That word, lucky, sent a chill down my spine every time. They made it sound like I had stumbled into fortune, like I hadn't spent years destroying my health, losing sleep, burning every ounce of energy I had just to make something out of nothing. Luck had nothing to do with it. It was blood, sweat, and sacrifice. But they didn't care. All they saw was a number that, in their minds, somehow belonged to them. I'd scroll through their messages at night, reading the same themes over and over: guilt, anger, manipulation disguised as love. My mom's voice in one voicemail still haunts me. "If you really loved us, you'd help us." That sentence hit like a knife. Because I did love them. That's what made it hurt so much. I wanted to believe they cared about me, not what I could give. But every message, every accusation proved the opposite. By the end of the week, I stopped answering altogether. I silenced my phone, blocked their numbers, and sat in the quiet for the first time in days. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was a start. The silence that followed was strange, heavy but peaceful. For the first time in years, I wasn't jumping to fix someone else's problem or calm someone's anger. It felt foreign, like learning to breathe all over again. Still, the guilt lingered in the back of my mind, whispering that I'd done something unforgivable by putting myself first. That's when I decided to go back to therapy, something I hadn't done since my startup days. I needed someone to help me untangle the mess in my head. The guilt, the love, and the betrayal that all blurred together. My therapist, Dr. Lee, listened quietly as I poured everything out. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge, just nodded as I told her about Thanksgiving, about Emily's betrayal, about the way my parents turned on me. When I finally stopped talking, she said something that stuck with me. "Alex, what would happen if you stopped trying to earn your family's love?" I didn't know how to answer. My entire life had been about that, trying to be the good son, the responsible brother, the one who fixed things. Even when I succeeded, I was still chasing their approval, like a kid desperate for a gold star. "What if," she said gently, "their love was always conditional? And this time, you just saw it clearly." That thought hit me harder than I expected. Maybe this wasn't something new. Maybe money didn't change them. Maybe it just revealed what was already there. I left her office that day feeling both lighter and sadder. I didn't reply to my family's messages after that. Not because I hated them, but because for the first time, I was choosing myself. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. And deep down, I knew it was long overdue. A few quiet weeks passed before the next storm hit. I'd started getting used to the silence, convincing myself maybe they'd finally accepted my decision. But then, one evening, as I was finishing up some work, my phone buzzed with a group text from my mom. I almost didn't look. When I did, my heart sank. The message was blunt, almost businesslike. Asterisk, "We've talked it over as a family, and we think it's fair if you contribute $3 million. We can split it evenly. It's only right since you have more than enough." Asterisk. I just stared at the screen, rereading it, waiting for my brain to catch up. They'd talked it over, without me. As if my life, my work, my money were just a resource they needed to divide among themselves. My hands actually shook. It wasn't even a request. It was a demand wrapped in fake politeness. I typed a dozen responses, deleted every one. I thought about sending a long explanation, reminding them that I'd worked for every penny, that I wasn't obligated to fix anyone's life but my own. But the more I thought about it, the less I wanted to justify myself. Finally, I just wrote one word: no. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. It was my mom. Asterisk, "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? You're dead to us, Alex." Asterisk. I read it 3 times, numb. That was it. Years of love, memories, and sacrifice, erased in one text. My stomach twisted, and my chest felt hollow. I put my phone down and just sat there, staring at nothing. That night, the reality hit me hard. They hadn't lost me because of money. They'd lost me because they never saw me as anything more than what I could give. The next morning, I woke up to find my phone flooded with notifications. Missed calls, voicemails, messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years, cousins, uncles, even an aunt who used to ignore me at family gatherings. Every single one had something to say about how selfish I'd become. Apparently, my mom had taken our private argument public, turning the entire extended family against me. Screenshots of her Facebook post were already circulating. She'd written, "Some people forget where they came from once they have money. They'd rather watch their own family struggle than share their blessings." Thousands of likes, dozens of comments. People I barely knew were calling me greedy, heartless, ungrateful. It was like watching my reputation burn in real time. At first, I was furious. Then, I felt something worse, disappointment. Not just in her, but in myself for still caring. I wanted to scream that it wasn't about the money, that it was about how they'd treated me, how quickly their love turned into entitlement. But explaining myself to people who didn't want to understand felt pointless. So I turned off my phone. For days, I didn't check messages, didn't respond to anyone. I went for long walks, cooked my own meals, worked late just to stay busy. It was quiet, painfully quiet, but the noise in my head was louder than ever. Then, one evening, I got an email from an old family friend, someone who knew my parents well. The message was short. "Alex, don't let them break you. They did the same thing to your uncle years ago when he got his inheritance. You just didn't know." I froze. That was the moment everything shifted. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was a pattern, one that had been repeating long before I ever had $12 million. That email rattled me. I sat staring at my screen, reading it over and over, trying to make sense of what I'd just learned. My uncle. I barely remembered him. He'd been distant for as long as I could recall, a name that only came up in half-whispered conversations when my parents thought we weren't listening. They always said he'd abandoned the family after coming into money. I'd believed them. But now, everything suddenly clicked. I called the family friend who'd sent the message, desperate for answers. He told me the truth, how my uncle had inherited a large sum after their parents passed, and how my family had immediately pressured him to share it. When he refused, they turned on him just like they were turning on me now. The story was almost identical, the guilt trips, the public shaming, the emotional manipulation. Eventually, my uncle cut off contact completely, moved states away, and never looked back. Hearing that shattered something inside me. All these years, I'd seen him as the villain, the selfish one. But he wasn't the villain at all. He was just the first one brave enough to say no. I spent that night thinking about how many lies I'd swallowed growing up, about loyalty, family, and doing the right thing. The right thing, according to them, always meant giving until you had nothing left. And suddenly, I understood why my uncle disappeared. He didn't leave because he didn't care. He left because he had to survive. I found his number through a mutual contact and sent him a message. It felt awkward at first, but I just told him the truth, that I finally understood him. When he replied a few hours later with, "Took you long enough, kid," I laughed through my tears. It felt like finding the only person who really got it. Over the next few weeks, my uncle and I started talking regularly. At first, our conversations were short, cautious. We were both testing the waters, feeling out years of distance built by my family's lies. But the more we talked, the more everything began to make sense. He told me stories about how my parents and their siblings used to fight over inheritance money, about how entitlement and manipulation had been running through the family for decades. "You didn't cause this," he said one night. "You just happened to be the next target." That sentence hit hard. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't crazy for feeling betrayed or angry. He told me that when he refused to give in, they painted him as cold and arrogant, the same way they were doing to me now. It was their pattern, guilt first, then rage, then isolation. Hearing him talk about it felt like listening to my own story being replayed, just set 20 years earlier. One night, I asked him how he managed to live with the guilt. He paused for a long time before answering. "At first, it eats you alive," he said quietly. "You question yourself every day, but eventually, you realize that peace is worth more than approval." That line stuck with me for days. Peace over approval. It sounded simple, but it was something I'd never truly given myself permission to choose. After that conversation, I started letting go, slowly but surely. I stopped checking my family's social media. I stopped wondering whether they missed me. I even stopped replaying Thanksgiving in my head. Every time the guilt crept in, I reminded myself, peace over approval. And for the first time in my life, I started believing I actually deserved both. A few months later, life felt different, quieter, but in the best way. I had built routines that didn't revolve around checking my phone or waiting for someone's apology that would never come. I was healing piece by piece. My company was growing faster than ever, but this time, I didn't throw myself into work to escape. I worked because I wanted to, not because I needed to prove something. The pressure that used to sit on my chest every morning had finally lifted. One afternoon, I got an unexpected email from my sister, Emily. My heart skipped when I saw her name. I stared at the screen for a long time before opening it. Her message was long, emotional, apologetic, even. She admitted that she'd crossed the line when she exposed my finances and that she'd been swept up in the chaos our parents stirred. She said she missed me, that she wanted to make things right. Reading her words felt strange. A part of me wanted to forgive her instantly. Another part still burned from the betrayal. I decided to take my time. I didn't respond right away. For once, I wasn't reacting out of guilt or anger. I was thinking about what was best for me. A week later, I wrote her back. I told her I appreciated the apology, that I wanted peace too, but trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. I didn't shut her out, but I didn't open the door completely either. She understood. We started small, occasional calls, a few texts here and there. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. For the first time, I felt like we were seeing each other not as rivals or obligations, but as two people trying to grow past the damage we inherited. And that, in itself, felt like progress. A few weeks after reconnecting with Emily, I found myself driving past my parents' old house one evening. It wasn't planned. I'd been in the neighborhood meeting an old mentor, and curiosity got the better of me. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The lights were off, the garden overgrown, the once perfect white fence now chipped and faded. It felt strange, standing there on the sidewalk, looking at the place that held so many memories, both beautiful and painful. For years, that house had symbolized everything I was supposed to live up to: duty, respect, loyalty. But now, staring at it from the outside, I realized something. Those walls had never really held love. They held control, expectation, and conditional affection. I wasn't angry anymore, just sad. Sad that it had taken this long to see things clearly. I didn't go to the door. I didn't need to. The closure I used to crave didn't live there anymore. It lived in the quiet life I'd built for myself, the one where peace wasn't something I had to earn. As I drove away, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily. Asterisk, thinking of you today. Thanks for giving me another chance. Asterisk, I smiled. Maybe we couldn't fix the past, but at least one of us was trying to build a better future. That night, I sat by the window in my apartment, city lights flickering below, and thought about everything that had happened since that Thanksgiving dinner. The lies, the greed, the heartbreak, it all led me here. Stronger, wiser, free. Money had exposed my family's flaws, but it also revealed something far more valuable: my own strength. I'd finally learned that love isn't proven through sacrifice. It's measured by respect. And for the first time, I had both for myself. A few months later, I received a formal letter from my parents' lawyer. My heart sank the moment I saw the envelope. For a second, I thought they might be reaching out to reconcile, but deep down, I knew better. When I opened it, my worst suspicion was confirmed. They were contesting my grandparents' estate, claiming that a portion of the inheritance that had once gone to my uncle, and later partially to me, was family money and should be redistributed. In simpler terms, they were trying to take legal action to get their hands on what they felt belonged to them. I wasn't even angry at first, just tired. Tired of being the family's walking ATM, tired of the manipulation dressed up as moral duty. I called my lawyer, explained everything, and within days, the whole mess was being handled professionally. My attorney's tone was calm but firm. They don't have a case, Alex. This is just pressure. Still, that night, I sat awake, staring at the ceiling. I couldn't stop thinking about how far they were willing to go. Family suing family. All because I refused to share what I'd earned. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. A few weeks later, they quietly dropped the case. I heard from a cousin that my mom had been humiliated when the lawyer explained they didn't have a legal leg to stand on. For once, they'd face consequences. It wasn't satisfying in the way I'd imagined. There was no moment of triumph, no gloating victory, just silence. But in that silence, I found something I hadn't felt in years: peace. They could twist the story however they wanted, but deep down, I knew the truth. I hadn't abandoned them. I'd finally freed myself from them. Time moved on quietly after that. The lawsuit had been their last attempt to pull me back into their web, and when it failed, they disappeared. No calls, no letters, not even the occasional guilt-tripping message I'd grown so used to. For the first time, the silence felt permanent. But instead of feeling empty, I felt steady, like I could finally hear my own thoughts without their noise drowning them out. I threw myself into new projects, not for validation this time, but because I loved the challenge. I started mentoring young entrepreneurs, people who reminded me of the kid I used to be, hungry, hopeful, and scared of disappointing everyone. I told them the truth. Success doesn't fix your life. It just exposes who belongs in it. Emily and I stayed in touch. She was doing better, got a new job, started therapy, and even apologized again one night over dinner. That time, it felt genuine, not forced. We laughed about old memories, and, for the first time in years, it didn't feel like walking on glass. I realized we were both trying to break the cycle, to not become the people who raised us. One weekend, we visited my uncle. Seeing the three of us sitting together felt surreal, like the fractured pieces of our family were finally rearranging themselves into something real. No expectations, no guilt, no money talk, just connection. Before we left, my uncle said something I'll never forget. "You didn't lose your family, Alex. You just found the real one hiding under all the noise." On the drive home, I couldn't stop smiling. For so long, I thought peace meant being alone. But now, I understood it differently. Peace wasn't isolation. It was choosing who you allowed to stand beside you. It's been over a year since that Thanksgiving that tore my world apart. Sometimes I still think about it. How quickly everything shifted. How a single secret could unravel decades of illusion. But instead of pain, what I feel now is clarity. My life has changed in ways I never expected. I moved to a new home outside the city, surrounded by trees and silence. I wake up early, drink my coffee on the porch, and there's this deep stillness that feels like peace finally has a sound. I've learned that money doesn't change people. It just strips away the masks. It reveals what was already there, hidden under politeness and obligation. My parents' love was never unconditional. It came with strings tied to guilt and expectation. Realizing that was painful, but necessary. Because once I stopped chasing their approval, I started to understand what real love looks like: quiet, respectful, and free. Emily visits sometimes. We talk for hours, not about the past, but about what's ahead. She's rebuilding her life, and I'm proud of her. We both promised we'd do things differently when we have families of our own, that we'd love without debt, without emotional price tags. Last week, I got an email from my dad. No apology, just a few lines asking if we could talk. I haven't responded yet. Maybe someday I will. But for now, I'm content letting the silence hold what words can't fix. Looking back, I don't regret anything. Losing them was painful, but losing myself would have been worse. I've learned that peace isn't given. It's chosen every single day. And when I said no that night, when I finally stood my ground, I thought I was breaking my family apart. But really, I was just breaking free.